Good morning. Thank you for joining Marianne and the professor. This morning, I have a guest with me. His name is Rob LeMaittre. And correct me if I'm saying that wrong. Rob, is that right?
No, that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
And Rob has spent 25 years with the Toronto Police Department. A portion of that, the latter portion of his 25 years, he was seconded to the Ontario Provincial Police. His whole career, he was working as a detective. So Rob, thank you so much for joining me this morning and taking the time to chat with me.
Yep. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So Rob, let's just jump right in here. You've been with a police force that you have been forced to retire out of because you don't like the direction that it's going. Walk us through a little bit of what you've experienced over the last several months or the last year in.
Right. Well, when COVID first started in the spring of 2020, I was working in a investigative unit at Guns and Gangs, and we continued business as usual. Really, gun violence was still predominant in Toronto, and they allowed us to work as normal. After a few months passed, the vaccines came out. There's some talk and some questionnaires that came out from the service asking our vaccine status and whether or not we were double vaccinated. On September 13th, a procedure came out talking about having everyone disclose by November 1st. And that at the time there was no real idea of how they were going to, what the consequences were, whether you would keep, if you weren't vaccinated, whether you'd be able to keep working. It was sort of left up in the air. There was actually no procedure to it. So November 1st came and passed. As far as I know, about 2,500 officers and civilian members did not disclose. And at that point, the service and seemingly the association working their part kind of kept on laying on the pressure. They took gym memberships away. If you weren't vaccinated, you weren't allowed to go to the gym. In each station has their own gym. You weren't allowed to do pay duties. That's extra duties when you're off duty. And they give excuses of why, because there are certain, like MLC wouldn't allow any unvaccinated officers in their buildings. So there was they kept on laying on the excuses and pressure. And come November 30th was the deadline to either be vaccinated, and they eventually came out with a procedure during the month, either be double vaccinated or you would be suspended without pay. And no choice of testing was ever given. I was working with the OPP, like you mentioned, and they were allowing their members to test. I was filling out the COVID questionnaire like everyone else every day, and reporting that to my supervisor. And come November 30th, I met up with one of a senior officer, and they took our badges and our warrant cards and they suspended us, and they basically didn't allow us to come back on we weren't allowed in a police facility because at that time no member of the public was allowed in the police facility, so that included us.
So there were 2,500 of you in your division who said no, we're not getting, or at least did not disclose their status. And out of those 2,500, how many stood tall and resisted the pressure?
Well, we're kind of nicknamed ourselves the Toronto 200, and it was around 250 or so, but quickly that dwindled down to under 200 through either resignations, officers going to other services, taking other jobs, or just resigning, and I don't know what happened.
So you're looking at 90% of that group that did not want the vaccine felt coerced and eventually succumbed, which
I-
is that's a horrific state of affairs. I mean, what are these police officers who did succumb and were coerced? I mean, are they not angry? Are they not frustrated? How is the morale in that group?
Well, from what I see, because I retired, I decided on June 21st, all the officers that were remaining, all the members that were remaining, were allowed to go back, not being vaccinated or anything. So there was,
Oh, that's
um,
this past June.
yes, past June
Okay,
21st.
so they reversed the decision.
They reversed the decision, although, I've heard stories when the officers went back, there obviously a lot of animosity. Some of the officers that obviously were coerced to get the vaccine are feeling put off because they went and got the vaccine against their original will. And now they're sitting beside an officer who stood his ground or her ground and or member, and they're back to work unvaccinated. In business as usual for the most
Business as
part.
usual. But okay, so for an officer who succumbed and bent to the rule, are they feeling an anger towards the unvaccinated colleague who has returned, or are they turning that anger towards the leadership?
I think it's both. I
Really?
think I think it is both. I think um, I I've talked to a lot of the members, and there's a lot of people that said, yeah, I didn't really want to get the vaccine, but I did because I couldn't afford it. And that's our big thing is my opinion is it's your own personal choice.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you not to get vaccinated. I'm not telling you to get vaccinated. I'm just saying we have rights.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of being a police officer is upholding the Charter of Rights. We took an oath to that. And part of that oath is to be not exposed to medical procedures that you don't want to take.
That's right. So you must have had some of your colleagues who I mean, you're more senior. So you must have had junior officers coming to you and saying, what should I do, or seeking advice. Did that happen? Was there a lot of dialogue amongst the force?
I think the sad thing is, well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's sad, is because medical information is private.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the big bone of contention. We didn't want to give our, medical status. We didn't want to give our vaccine status. And the association was fighting for us for that. I say that because they were also putting out memorandums saying we think that you should get your vaccine at every single one that they put out, even though they said, but we do support your choice and we will fight for your rights. So as time went on, it came very clear to the association was not doing what they could. There was no job action. They allowed 200 plus members to be suspended. Is probably the worst thing that the association has ever allowed to happen to its members.
That's
As
right.
far as I know, for at least the last 30, 40 years, there's never been a layoff, let alone off, 200 and some members getting suspended without pay.
Without
And
pay.
then even without pay, on top of that, they took away benefits during that time. The association fought for a little bit. I think the benefits were extended to March 1st. And then at that point, they were taken away completely. Our pension plans were not paid into, and that was taken away. So people, you think, first of all, you had to find a job, or you had to find a way to help your family survive this. So in my case, we moved. We had a city Toronto house in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife was in the same situation in her occupation. And we moved out of the city, and we moved about an hour and a half north. And just to move and being able to move, we were able to survive.
You're able,
And
but if you look to some of your younger colleagues who, I mean, Talk about being cut off, and you're providing for a family, you have financial obligations. I mean, it's devastating. So where are some of your cohorts? What has happened to them? Are they sinking or swimming, or do they have support?
I talk regularly to a lot. We formed a COVID Alliance Committee, out of the Toronto 200. We talk to each other on a regular basis on Zoom calls like this. We try to support each other. We're like during the time that we were suspended, we tried to support each other mentally as well, because there was also no assistance there. I was part of writing several letters and emails to the service and the association saying, speaking about the mental health of these officers and that my concerns for them. There was myself and I think 2 or 3 other supervisors or the highest ranking officers that were suspended without pay. We just continue to do what we were supposed to do, is look out for our people and have their best interests in mind. And,
yeah, so you've been a little bit like a father or a brother to these people who are in kind of a catastrophic situation, their careers, their livelihood, financially. What you talk about the union or the association not backing you. What, in your sense, what's going on? Who is backing? Who is really in control here? Because they're not acting on their members' behalf. Right. Whose behalf are they actually acting on? What's your hunch?
Well, our excuses, they kept on going as a majority decided to get vaccinated. However, they were going to keep defending for our rights. So they went with the majority. And unfortunately, at the time when this all began, the association was going through a voting process. So just after all the elections were done, the returning president stayed in power, John Reid, and most of the vice president and mostly the other members too. They just seemingly put everything into place right after that election. Like, if it was almost like the service was waiting to see who was elected, because I think there was a couple candidates that would have been elected for president, and let's just say that I think the outcomes would have been very different if these procedures were put in place before the election. I think more people would have thought a little bit more about who they voted for. And
so is there a sense that the person who is in that position is owned by someone or owned by an organization? Is there an agenda?
I've been investigating, like you said, for most of my 25 years in policing, and it's very suspicious on how everything had played out and ran so smoothly for the service without any walkouts, job actions.
That's right.
Like we had, I remember in Toronto, I can't remember how long ago was it, 15 years ago, we had a job action just over salaries, and officers actually marched in uniform, which was unheard of and technically, insubordination at the time. But nothing ever got done with that. And, the association did it, and they fought for, to protect us after that. And nothing was done. There wasn't any consideration. And they said it was from pressure that people who got vaccinated were saying that we don't want you to support them. As far as we're concerned, they took the whole, Justin Trudeau approach to the unvaccinated, like we were dirty or, unworthy of protection.
So you're a detective.
Yes.
What do you think is going on here? Has the Toronto Police Department been hijacked by a bigger entity that has perhaps nefarious goals?
Well, we know John Tory's a member of the WEF. He's on their web page.
So he's a World Economic Forum guy.
and he sits on our police services board who
So
make,
right
these
off the bat,
decisions.
okay,
Yeah.
so here you unearth that. That's a major bit of information.
Yes.
So so who is his allegiance to? The World Economic Forum or the Toronto people and the Toronto Police Force?
I would say the answer is pretty obvious. I mean, as a politician, I don't think, first of all, the government should be involved in people's medical procedures and what is being out there. I mean, I'm sure they played along with the pandemic and did what they thought was right or whatever. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to debate that, but there's scientists that and people that will. And I think something just came out in Ontario where someone, an arbitrator, someone ruled against the physician, the College of Physicians, and being able to muzzle the doctors from free speech, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see how they were only getting bits of information, and the unvaccinated people promoting unvaccinations or not getting the vaccine were sort of muted during that time.
Absolutely. They were silenced and disciplined if they spoke out. That's right.
That's right.
So there's only one narrative.
Yeah.
But, as a police officer and as a detective, the charter quite well.
Yeah.
These things are in gross violation of the charter. So for you as a police force to see yourselves become the victim of these violations, there's almost an irony there. Here you are trying to enforce the charter and you become the victim of violation of it. Incredible frustration.
Yeah. And as soon as it happened, you wait that 24-hour period, the cooling off period, so to speak, but I never cooled off. I fought them the entire time, sending them letters and emails. I made my decision right away that I would never return. When I first became a police officer, I thought I'd do this job for 35 years.
Yes.
But after 25 years and being discriminated against, being my, laws that protect me being ignored, the civil battles and the legal battles are to come. But therein lies the other problem, is because we were represented by an association, we have to wait till the arbitration process is over. And there is an arbitration process, and it has yielded some results. I think some of the officers that did return to work are getting some benefits backdated.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some good things coming already. So the service is backpedaling slowly.
Why do you think they made the decision to bring back the unvaccinated officers?
I think it was legal advice. I actually attended the Ontario Associated Chiefs of Police seminar. It was a labor seminar with another detective. I'm sure he won't mention it. He mind mentioning his name, Dave Haynes, who is also very outspoken in media about the whole pandemic situation. And we went there and we listened to the Ontario Association Chief of Police Legal Counsel say, what are you doing? If you're not back to work already, and that was in January or February, I think the conference was, if they're not back to work, or you haven't brought the people who are unvaccinated back to work, what are you doing? You're just setting yourself up for legal issues. And they blame the provincial and federal government for not actually passing mandates. And then in Ontario here, they left it up to individual employers. Well, of course, John Tory and the city of Toronto were all in on unvaccinated. That happened with EMS, TTC, Toronto firefighters were fired. I think their EMS were suspended without pay, just like us. There was in other places, people were just let go. The Toronto School Board, they suspended or fired people as well.
So do you suspect there may be a not a countersuit, but a suit against the Toronto Police Force? Or, it seems to me that there should be a massive lawsuit for damages, for anguish, for compensation financially, but are there some massive suits that
Yeah,
are?
well, and again, we have to, I know for us, we have to wait till the arbitration's over. We cannot pursue legal measures until the arbitration process is over. And they say that after they deal with the group in the arbitration process, then they'll start dealing with the individual issues. And then the individual issues are for myself. I don't mind sharing is that I was tested. I did the with the immunity test with Dr.
Oh,
Pelk.
with Dr. Steve Pellick. Yes, yes.
And it was actually a study. So a part of his study was not to be vaccinated until 2023.
Yeah.
So that I can, I forget the technical term for it, so that I can stay unvaccinated and
That's
they have
right.
I guess, a base to test against.
That's right. You're kind of a control in the study.
And yeah,
I
control
just
group.
spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he's actually having the actors union in LA sending people up for testing. They're joining his study because a lot of
That's
the
excellent.
unvaccinated actors need to be, their union will cover them if they're
Right.
part of this study.
Yeah.
So he's actually getting some traction from the US right now, and that's a very large group, the actors union.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
no, that's a very important group to be part of because, well, his results are so compelling too.
yes,
That,
yes.
he shared with me that the people who are unvaccinated have much better immune markers. Their immune system is much more robust than the vaccinated against
Right.
COVID. So
Yes.
the irony here is that he's saying that the more vaccinated you are, the more compromised your immune system is. So
Right.
it's very important that people like you are part of that group as
Mhm.
unvaccinated, because
Right.
you are the control and you
Yes.
cannot get vaccinated. So I find it fascinating that your police force has reversed, backpedaled. That's an acknowledgement of guilt right there. But
I would say so.
yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what the legal outcome is. And I do hope there's a serious and severe backlash on this, because it's such a gross violation. And I can't imagine the frustration and the anger for people like yourself. I mean, you've ducked out now 10 years earlier than you anticipated.
Yes.
And it's entirely, how frustrating, hey?
Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's caused me to do many things that I wouldn't have even thought about doing previously. But I just wanted to mention, I was talking about the immunity. So eventually I did disclose that I was unvaccinated. I did have natural immunity through the Dr. Pellick's test. I did ask for exemptions as well. And they were all ignored by the Toronto Police Service. And in addition to that, where I was working with the Ontario Provincial Police, they offered testing, and I could have stayed working because I had no daily procedure to go to any Toronto Police facility. So the ironic part about it is, if an OPP officer arrested someone in a Toronto warrant and they drove to a Toronto police station and they were unvaccinated and doing testing, they could have brought the prisoner to the Toronto police station, dropped them off, and left, and no questions would have been asked. And I was working for the OPP, so, and I was still suspended. And
yeah,
the
there's no logic here. You can have a criminal come in and you have no idea what their status is, and you on the inside are are barred. The nonsense, it must, is morale in the Toronto Police Force at an all-time low? I mean, how is morale?
Well, since I'm not there, I can only take hearsay. But what I would say is morale is at an all-time low. The people who got vaccinated that didn't want to get vaccinated are angry, rightfully so. They were coarse. They were. I can think of 10 friends that got the vaccine just to keep their job. They said, "Rob, I can't do what you're doing." And I said, "That's up to you. I mean, it's your personal choice." I never said, "Please don't do it." I never begged or
No.
climbed on a podium and said, this is what you should do. It's everyone's personal choice, and people did what they did, but out of coercion. And basically it's criminal offense of extortion. You cannot,
That is exactly. And okay, so 2,500 did not want the vaccine, but the vast majority of them felt coerced and did it. How big is the force? How, you say 2,500 people, put that in perspective for me. How many people are we talking in the force?
8,000 members.
Well, you know what? 2,500 then is about 30% of the force did not want this.
Right.
And then they whittle it down to 200 lone souls who stood strong. So 30% intuitively felt there's something not right here, and my rights are being violated. Right. That is, it is criminal. And so now, are you finding that the composition of the force is changing? Is the force bringing on new people? Because you hear rumors of this, that there's new people coming in who are aligned with these nefarious goals. Have you noticed anything?
Well, I think policing right now is a kind of a rough industry right now to get into. Who wants to be a police officer? Like, there's a large movement in the US to defund the police. There was, that movement was here in Canada, and that carries over. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking about what do I want to do, for me, it was, do you want to be a police officer or a firefighter back then? And I was a volunteer firefighter, but I wanted to be a police officer.
Yeah, but what Canadian would like to see the police defunded? Who is backing that movement? Put on your detective cap and tell me who's behind that defund the police, because I don't know any Canadian who do not want to see a stronger police force.
Right.
So who do you think is behind that?
I think it's all part of the same group.
Yeah. So like the George Soros kind of World Economic Forum, create chaos. Yes, because this defund the police movement kind of came out of left field, and you got to question who's behind that, and talk about destroying morale amongst the police force, to have that sense that the people don't want you and aren't willing to financially fund you. But it's nonsense. That's not, if you were to take a poll of most Canadians, it's nonsense.
No, but the media portrays it well in mainstream media.
Yeah.
So you do have that.
You've got that going on. So with that in mind, any new additions that are made to the police force, have you noticed that they're profiling new officers, as little henchmen, so to speak? Have you picked up anything?
Well, I don't know. I don't think they're hiring henchmen. I think they're hiring whoever they can. I think the pickings are slim, and I think they want to fill classes, and I think they have a hard time filling classes. And that's to go to Elmer, the Ontario Police College. Yeah. And I also think that I just think, well, I think they have the vaccine policy for new hires as well.
Oh, so right off the bat, you're building your force with compliant officers. Right. So that screening right there is dangerous in a sense, because the type of person that you're attracting is obviously lacks a little bit of spine, and will be compliant.
See, I don't even like going that far.
Sorry,
I don't even like going that. I don't even like going that far. I strongly say, people chose to get the vaccine, and if they chose to get it on their own free will, then I'm completely fine with that. It's the people that are being coerced that I have a problem with. I just want people to be able to choose. That's the biggest thing. And we have every time we go outside, you have the choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing. I just like everyone to choose the decision that's right for them.
Exactly. Well, and that's the Canadian way, is giving people choice and respecting the choices that people make. Yes. I guess my concern is, when they're shaping the police force currently, they've added a requirement that sends the police force in a certain direction, you know,
Right.
with that.
That is concerning.
Yeah,
There's
that's
also
true.
the fact that, you know, you did get so many to comply with your vaccine mandate. My concerns were, and I voiced my concerns with the association, the fact that I said, if you're going to make people get the vaccine, the vaccine is not the issue here. You know, freedom and freedom to choose and
Mhm.
personal choice is the issue. And they never, I I I worked with all these association members. I talked to them personally several times, and I said, "This is the issue. You have to make it. It's a rights issue. It's a personal choice issue.
Mhm.
You can't make it about the vaccine." And they didn't want to do that. They ignored that message that I give them, and I think it helped. I think it helped their agenda. And here in Ontario, you have one of the largest unions in Canada. I think it was. The union president being caught and charged with some sort of bribe that he had taken. I think it was, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries.
The Unifor, the car union president,
Mhm.
he was allegedly took $50,000 into, you know, for the tests, to take a certain test and have his members do that. He also spoke out against our president when our president said that he would support members' freedoms to choose.
Mhm.
Our president did say that, so I do have to give him some kudos for that, but he never exercised any of those actual thoughts. He came out and said it, but we knew what his agenda was.
Yeah.
And you know, and I know him personally. I worked with him at 14 Division, you know, when I first started, and he obviously he obviously, I think, I can't. There's no way that I have thought millions of different directions on this, on how this played out, and there's no way that the association did what they did without accepting some sort of promise, bribe. I don't know what it is.
Well, you know what? You, Rob, are a detective.
Yes.
I would say dedicate a good amount of time to try to get to the bottom of that, because I think
Yes.
you're right. And
Right.
if that can get unearthed, that would be really important, critical information to have in the
Right.
public domain. So I encourage you to dedicate your time and use the means that you have at your disposal to get to the bottom of this, because most definitely there's something sinister. It's just a matter of unearthing it. But actually, on kind of a different note, here you are as police, your profile of your job and your activities over the last year or two have been quite different. How has that been to be enforcing things on Canadians? Kind of, how would I say? I don't want to say bullying, but it
Mhm.
is bullying. Some of the activities that I see the police doing, that I've seen in the media,
Right.
they're bullying Canadians in
Mhm.
unprecedented ways. What was that like to be part of a force that's doing, you know, engaged in this?
Well, luckily, I don't see myself as part of that. I was in a unit that was separate from that and was not exposed to any of that.
Mhm.
But I did say, that was one of my arguments with the association. I did say to them, I said, if you have people that are willing to be coerced and go along with this mandate and allow this to happen, and then force those opinions onto other people, other members, and they're actually calling you up and saying that you can't support these officers because they want a personal choice of being unvaccinated. Um, I said to them, I said, these are the same people that are going to be more than willing to pull kids away from their families and do the whole Gestapo type thing,
Exactly.
to pull families apart and force vaccinations if it comes to that.
And do you
Uh,
think it could come to that? Or is that, do you think that that's a possibility?
I think anything's a possibility right now.
Yeah.
You know, the media seems to prepare for us more lockdowns in the fall, and you know, it seems to be pointing that the agenda is not done. Trudeau's talking about an election for some reason. All of it seems very suspicious to me.
Mhm.
But um, I would think that the reason things have slowed down, or seem to be slowed down, is partly because I removed myself from all that, and I don't see it every day.
Yeah.
But I think people are aware now, and more aware, or have dug their feet in and said, "There's no way I'm taking a vaccine, and you can't make me take a vaccine." And they've seen what's happened, and they see where the service did, and they suspended 200 and so officers and members without pay for not getting the vaccine. And if they try to force them to get another one and make that mandatory, the numbers are going to be much higher.
So the
And
opposition, there may be a growing opposition. I mean, we did have that announcement a week or two ago, you know, in Canada, saying every 9 months, you're
yes,
going to need to be up to date, have a booster every 9 months.
yep.
So you think your ranks may stand up with that and say, enough, we're not
Yeah.
playing this game anymore? Do you think the vast majority will refuse?
I think at this point it's probably about 50-50. And
Interesting.
if
Yeah.
it's that high, then there's no way that they'll be able to implement a mandate. There's no way.
Yeah, there's no way. And also on the heels of 5 doctors, another young gal, I think a 27-year-old physician died yesterday. So you have 5 doctors in the last week dying in Ontario after being boosted. I think people are beginning to get terrified. Do you get that sense?
Well, not only the people who got vaccinated should be they should be terrified.
Mhm.
But my question is, as an investigator, who's investigating this?
Yeah.
You have, I think it's 3 doctors from Trillium Hospital alone, like within 2 weeks of getting their 4th booster, I believe it was, and all these doctors die. In any other normal situation, there would be a criminal investigation launched.
And is there? To your point,
I
is
have
there?
not heard of any. I have not heard of any source, like from Peel Regional Police or any media source, that any investigation of any kind has taken place.
Well,
And it
you
doesn't surprise me, because the coroner's building is under the direction of the chief medical officer as well. So,
well, I had heard that they weren't even doing autopsies. So that to me sounds rather peculiar, but no autopsy, no report, no information. What's happening there?
I can't understand that. Knowing I've been to a lot of death investigations, people dying suddenly,
Mhm.
and I've seen autopsies ordered for 60-year-olds that just died suddenly.
Mhm.
The families can ask for an autopsy, and the coroner, from my understanding, has to allow that to happen if the family
Right.
wants to know why they died. And for a 27-year-old, I think it was triathlete, to
Yes.
just suddenly die,
Yeah.
just so everyone knows, there was never anything such thing as sudden adult death syndrome. I never
No.
heard that before in my life. I've seen SIDS, and that question, that comes up to question, and that's part of the reason why I made my choices, is that brings into question vaccines as well. The SIDS.
Absolutely. And
So
I didn't connect the dots on that, but I reflect back and I think, wow, these poor children are on a schedule, a vaccine
mhm,
schedule, and then there's these random deaths. And now I reflect back and think there's very good likelihood that those are vaccine deaths.
yes,
But all of my 3 children were vaccinated. I never gave it a second thought, but now I would. The whole vaccine industry, in my mind, is suspect, and
right,
I wouldn't touch any. But
right.
it's very interesting that there has not been a criminal investigation into those 5 deaths, and there needs to be. Do you have any pull to initiate? Do you have any good friends still back in the
No.
force that you can nudge and say, get on it?
No. And I say that quite bluntly is because I think I sent you an email showing a letter I wrote on November 11th in 2021. And basically I described in there what was happening and I touched on the fact with the testing and the reliability of the testing and how much the government was relying on the tests. And we knew that there's a 95% false positive.
Positive, that's right.
Right. And so the numbers were out of skew.
Yes.
And all these people didn't have COVID, and the test didn't test for COVID. They test for anything.
That's
There was
right.
a number. I think there was a list of over 20 things that it could test for, and it would just come back positive, and it could be anything.
Could be anything. It could be you had coronavirus last year. It could be, yeah. I mean, there were samples of it. I remember Elon Musk said he had 4 PCR tests in a day, and 2 were positive, 2 were negative. Well, you know, there you go. The test is nonsense, and yet it was used as a determinant of your COVID status, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. A scare tactic.
Very scary. But why do you think that in terms of an investigation happening with these 5 doctors, who would be blocking a criminal investigation? This is a massive event in my mind. 5 doctors within a week or 2 are dead, young. Okay, there's one who was battling cancer, but you've got 4 other relatively young, healthy doctors who are now dead. That warrants an investigation.
Absolutely.
So
at least an autopsy. But
I think an investigation. However, who is blocking that?
I just don't think any. I don't know who's getting the marching. I don't know who's getting these orders.
Where, but it's very.
I mean, we have our beliefs, right, with the ties and everything. But I believe that. I believe that, you know, the chief of Toronto, who was my sergeant at 14 Division also, so I know him personally. And he just made this decision of everyone needs to be vaccinated and there's no ifs, ands, and buts. And I tried talking to him. I asked for an audience with him. He refused to talk to me. I sent him a letter. There was no response whatsoever.
Yeah.
Under the Police Services Act of Ontario, the chief is mandated to investigate all criminal allegations that are made relevant to him. And I pointed out in the letter that the testing for COVID was a fraud. Therefore, the numbers of people testing positive for COVID for fraud, essentially, we weren't in a pandemic.
That's right.
The COVID was either a bad flu or cold. Unfortunately, it could kill people with weakened immune systems and different.
But the influenza kills people. You know,
that's right.
Influenza apparently is more dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I made all those allegations in the email, pointed it out that it's at least fraud, possibly extortion if people are being forced to take the vaccine to keep their jobs. That falls under the criminal offense of extortion. And instead of making an investigation or launching the Toronto Police Service into an investigation, he decided that he would have professional standards serve me a misuse of email documentation.
Ooh.
So that was given to me on November 30th, also the day I was suspended without pay.
That's a very underhanded, that's quite shocking.
For speaking out.
Yes, for speaking out. You're getting disciplined for not being obedient. Okay, you're an investigator. Can you go for a deep dive on this individual?
Well,
because do you not have access to things that we hardly know anything about? You know what I mean? Like
it's not CSI. It's not like in the
show. No, but like you must have a way of pulling some strings, accessing confidential. Like, do you not have any methods that you could get busy or enlist people? You know, have the ability to hack into emails or correspondence To
No.
me, I mean, maybe you can't say, but to me, it seems that it might be warranted right now
Right. Well,
to,
what we
mhm,
have done, sorry to cut you off, what we
no,
have done is we've requested many times, and not just myself, but a lot of the officers that were suspended without pay, we requested the written medical information that was provided to the Toronto Police Service and separately the Toronto Police Association, advising them to advise us to get vaccinated. We want the doctors, we want the medical professionals that they sought out to
yes,
get this medical information because it's contrary, like,
absolutely.
to
Is that not like the
the
Freedom of
science.
Information Act? You
Yes.
obligate. So how long ago did you request that, and what has been the outcome?
So far, we haven't received any documents.
Was there a timeline associated with it?
Well, I know the Toronto Fire Services,
Yes.
they act through the Freedom of Information, and they received a document. It was a one-page document saying that there is no documentation of that.
So, okay, no documentation. So
Right.
when they have that request put in, they have nothing. They
Right.
base their decision on nothing.
Yes.
So how long ago did you submit that, your request?
The request was sent out, I believe, May.
May. So
So,
usually there's a timeline associated with that you ask for a
yes.
response by a certain date. Any
Yes, as far
idea?
as I know, verbally, we've got no response.
No, verbally. Okay, let me know on that. That's very interesting. So
Yes.
I've seen this before in other countries as well. They get back there's a nothing,
Yeah.
a big
Yeah.
nothing burger. The
Yes.
whole, all of this agenda is based on nothing.
Right.
Well, obviously it's based on
Yes.
something, but certainly not based on science, not based on doctors, not based on studies, research, etc.
Right.
So this is kind of going in a different direction, but you've seen the vast majority of your force vaccinated. Have you noticed any injuries? Have you noticed any change in the people? Because I'm hearing that there's a lot of neurological changes that people are experiencing who have been vaccinated. Have you noticed anything?
I can't say because I haven't been around them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was working with people that were getting vaccinated. Before we were suspended, and some of them felt fine. Some of them said their arms hurt. Some of them said they were sick for a few days. Luckily, none of them had serious situations, but
Mm-hmm.
there was at one time 11, I believe it was 11 officers, 11 members that had booked off, either injured on duty or sick due to the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are some serious struggles there with some of those officers that I don't think that they'll ever be the same again. And as far as I know, just like a lot of situations and everywhere, is that it's not being recognized as a vaccine injury.
Mm-hmm.
And, these officers are struggling for that recognition.
Well, that's right, because the Vaccine Injury Support Program out of Ottawa has had endless reports submitted and requests for compensation, but only a handful of Canadians. I mean, I personally know a woman who had a massive stroke a couple of days after her shot. Her doctor went to bat for her, submitted a report to VISP, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And her life is upside down. She can't drive, she can barely walk, and she's not old, she's so there's something wrong with that program. The Canadians who are submitting reports for compensation, they're not getting it. The government has turned their back.
From what I'm hearing is the officers that attended, because they were encouraging officers to attend to get the vaccine while on duty, and the officers that became sick right away, they've been compensated through workers' compensation. In Ontario anyway, workers' compensation has recognized that there are vaccine injuries. Like if you go to work and you're perfectly fine, you get a vaccine and you can't even finish your shift, there's something wrong.
So to receive compensation with workers' comp, this is new to me,
Yeah.
what are the qualifications to be, how do you qualify for workers' comp?
They have to have they have to have a physician say that you've, experienced, you got your vaccine on duty and your
Yeah.
employer asked you. And,
Yes.
I mean, I think it's even gone as far as if your employer has enforced a mandate and you've been vaccine injured, and that if you can find a doctor that's willing to stick his neck out,
Yeah.
maybe there'll be more now after the last ruling, but if you're lucky enough to do that, then workers' compensation is compensating these officers and members, as far as I know.
That's very good to hear. Now, as an officer, were you directed to go to any one location to get your vaccine? Or was there any direction given?
Yeah, the association prepared many different locations that you could go to get a vaccine, and they made arrangements for special clinics for officers and members.
Okay. Now, do you know, the reason I'm asking this is some of the doctors have told me that hospital staff, doctors, nurses, etc., are directed to go to in-house clinics.
Mhm.
And apparently those clinics have better outcomes in terms of vaccine injuries.
Get a
And
different lot number, maybe.
better lot number.
Yeah.
Do you suspect that that might be going on with the police department?
Absolutely. I think whatever's happening, whatever suspicions are out there, I think anything's possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't, because I know that there's officers that went to other clinics and, they got sick. I don't know.
This is what I've heard.
Yeah.
This is what I've heard from doctors is they say their colleagues that did not go to the in-house clinics provided at the hospitals, those were the ones that were getting injured. The ones that went to the in-house ones seemed to fare better, which tells me there's a little bit of manipulation going on. They're trying to keep their ranks healthy and safe.
And I also think, and be quite honest with you, I've heard many officers talk about it, and is officers complying, making the system work, unfortunately, but paying for what we nickname the floor shot is, a doctor or a qualified person who is able to give out vaccines would be paid a certain amount of dollars to say and sign off on your vaccine card.
Right. Put the contents of the vial on the floor. Thank you very much. And here is a little bit of dinero. Do you suspect that that has happened within the force more than we know?
100%.
Really?
I had heard numbers even with the I coached a vaccine-free hockey team, and we put an organization together, and I met certain individuals, and part of what came out of the Ontario Hockey Federation is about 30% of the kids that were playing hockey were unvaccinated and had fake vaccine passports. So
this is what I've been hearing as well. I've been hearing it in the ranks of doctors. There have been doctors coming forward saying there's a good number of us that have fake papers, and now we're feeling guilty because we're still suggesting to our patients to get the vaccine, but we haven't done it. So there's a huge, guilt surrounding this, but I suspect that's going on. And I've heard a lot of reports internationally. The biggest one that I heard was a big, not controversy, but a whistleblower in Spain, where there were thousands of very high level politicians, actors, elite, who had all were part of this ring where they all had fake papers. But interestingly, in Spain, nothing happened from what I've heard, because they're all people in position of power. But I think there's a lot of that going on. I think there's so many people who have just thought, okay, I'm not going to fight this. I'm going to go along, but I'm not getting it, but I'm going to go along.
Yeah. If those people would have just stuck to their original morals and original thoughts and their original beliefs, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Exactly.
Because there would have been too many of us to do anything.
That's right. So
And
if you were to take a wild guess in the Toronto police force, what percentage of the officers went that route? What would you
but
guess?
the number I keep hearing is 30%.
30%.
30% of the people who say they got vaccinated or have a vaccine passport with 2 vaccinated shots are probably fake
Yeah. Well,
or floor
you have
shots.
that's right.
Right,
You have Doug Ford, whose daughter came out and said he's not vaccinated. No one in the family is vaccinated. It's fake
right.
papers. She has blown the whistle on her own father.
Yeah.
How much worse can it get? You've got the mayor of Toronto, whose family member says no, it's fake, it's a fraud.
Mhm.
So no, it's just a massive psyop that we're in. What do you? I mean, I hear the chickens or the roosters in the background there. Obviously, you're on a farm. What's your prediction coming into this fall?
I
What's your
think
best guess?
I think they want to push more lockdowns. I think they're preparing us for it. They're doing the exact same thing they did originally before in the spring of 2020 there or 21 when they started pushing lockdowns, and they started talking about it. They started talking about new variants coming, and like I don't know who
Mhm.
has this crystal ball, but
Exactly.
apparently they have a crystal ball on variants now, and I just see the exact same scenario carrying out for the fall, and with shortages and food shortages, and I think there's fuel shortages out in BC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things will get a lot worse.
I think
And
it's going to get, so if you have 50% of the police force that you think may not comply with the booster, there's a
right.
mass awakening. What's that look like? What do you think that will look like?
Well, I think the service will take a lighter stance and provide testing this time. I think the service has admittedly allowing officers back have admitted that they did the wrong thing. They
Mhm.
revoked the procedure, which is unheard of. The arbitrator hasn't ruled yet, and they're backpedaling on everything that they've done. They've backpedaled on vacation. They've backpedaled on their benefits. They're they're backpedaling on everything. Now, did you? The problem I have is, do you think they did that all to set it up for November? Or this fall? I don't know. I just find it very odd though that the arbitrator has his next date is November 2nd. So why are they waiting to the fall? I mean, they've lost all traction. I think there's very few people that vaccinated or not are all in for every 9 months,
No,
you know.
I would say, well, the psychologists say there will be a small group, 20 or 30%, who who are fully brainwashed and will continue to go along.
Right,
But that leaves 70% of the population that is saying enough.
right. And that always breaks down to the 30, 40, 30 rule, right? Wherever the 30% will comply, whatever, the
Yeah.
40% will kind of gravitate to whatever is most popular. And I think the 30% with the convoy and all the change, the outcry in
Mhm.
the protests that have happened, I think the 40% are starting to lean towards not participating in the vaccine program. And
Yes,
I think that's great,
that's
but I think there'll be, there'll be consequences for that.
exactly. Now, you've been in the thick of a lot of drama over the last couple of years, and you see what the media, how they have presented the facts, and yet you're you're in the thick of it. You're in the center of the drama. What's your read on what the media has been doing? Has it been an accurate portrayal of reality, or is it completely contrived?
There's no free speech within the media. I think you've had a few media people who have resigned and come out and spoke out
Mhm.
against what's happening there. And our media in Canada is mainstream anyway, is owned by the government, and it's
So
run by the
it's
government.
an arm of the government. So
That's an arm.
when you have been part of part of certain events, and then you see what the media, how they portray it, is it absolutely diametrically opposed to reality, or what?
Right. It's just like any protest.
Mm-hmm.
90% of the people there are compliant, well-behaved people, and
Mm-hmm.
you might have, you know, maybe even less, but 10% or less that might pick up a rock and throw it. But the media covers the guy throwing the rock at the police, and then the media records the police reaction, and that's how they always portray those protests. But
Mm.
normally protests are 90% peaceful.
Yes.
Um, you know,
And
but
look at
it's sort of the same thing when they're playing with COVID, right? You
exactly.
know, they're playing with numbers, playing with stats. The unvaccinated, now you're completely vaccinated, but you have to wait till 14 days after that. Why? Because there's probably a reaction within those 14 days, and they can record it as an unvaccinated problem.
I don't think a
It,
lot of people realize that yeah, for all the hospital reports,
mhm,
anyone who has a reaction within 14 days of their vaccine is reported as unvaccinated.
right,
Well, that's a very handy reporting system
right,
that completely buries and hides reactions to the vaccine.
that's right.
But no one ever talks about that. So
Yeah.
when you speak to naysayers who say, but the media, I trust Global, I trust CBC, what do you say to them?
Um, well, that's unfortunate. You know, uh, it it's it's mind control. Um, Mainstream media has set out um, to scare people into submission,
Mm-hmm.
and um, they're gonna, if you're in that constant state of paranoia,
Mm-hmm.
um, you're going to comply with whatever they're saying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if they portray a pandemic of mass proportions happening, they're going to create the panic in the public, and that panic is going to stay within the public. You can see it. The
Mm-hmm.
people that are scared are still walking around outside with masks on,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate. I feel sad for them. And the masks themselves, I mean, that's a whole other topic. I mean,
Yeah.
the service issued cloth masks at one point, which we all know does nothing. It's like wearing a picket fence in in
Yeah.
front of your face. They never once approached me and said, Rob, you know, you have a goatee, or you won't be able to get a seal on your face with that mask. So I think you should shave. They never once told us how to dispose of those masks, because generally speaking, if you're in a pandemic, wouldn't that be a biohazard?
Yes, that's right.
No. No, instead of, you see them all over the streets of Toronto, just floating and being blown in the wind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. The whole approach, it doesn't make any sense. The command center would never set up any command posts. We're in a pandemic. People are dying everywhere. They wanted to make it seem, and nothing was done in emergency circumstances. Like nothing police wise was really implemented. Um, it was business as usual, other than the fact that they give us these cloth masks. They were later replaced by some masks made in China. And they tried to force you to wear them. They told you to kind of work from home if you could. And we did Zoom calls and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Um, it was, but they never told us, they never, no disposal ideas, no,
No,
there,
it's just a sham on, and it's very someone can call me a conspiracy theorist, but for someone like, I call myself a conspiracy analyst, not a theorist,
yeah.
but it's very difficult for someone to turn to you, Rob, and say, well, Rob, okay, you're a police officer, you're a detective.
Mhm.
Very hard to slap that label on someone like you. So do you find that when you speak to people who disagree with you or who are still asleep, do they have a tough time contradicting what you're telling them?
Well, I think the what I see is just like if you go to a crime scene and people are standing around talking to each other,
Mhm,
then they start adapting everyone's ideas and what they saw.
mhm,
And you don't really get a true idea of what they individually witnessed themselves.
mhm,
They've adopted other people's stories and beliefs and what happened, and they've come to some conclusions that they shouldn't have otherwise.
mhm,
So the
mhm.
ideal situation is you come to a crime scene and you interview these witnesses, and all these witnesses have individual ideas. They haven't spoke to each other. They haven't done anything. Well, that's the problem with everything what's happening with COVID, is everyone's watching the same news. Everyone's being brainwashed by the same media. How many times have you gone to a media source over the years? If you look back, 5 years ago, and you had a serious thing happen, an event happen, and each media source would cover it differently.
Yeah.
Now you could basically, I mean, you can basically go from one channel to the other, and they're using the same catchphrases.
They're talking heads, and their
Do, do
narrative,
the right
the
thing.
language is exactly the same. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So they have been given the script, and they're all saying the same.
Yeah.
It's quite marvelous the way they manage to coordinate their thoughts. Normally they were competitors to each other, trying to get the best story, but now they're all talking heads.
They're in cohorts. They've
Yeah.
they've essentially became the witnesses that stood around and talked at a crime scene.
Yes.
They've adapted the same story, and they're sticking to it.
So where's that story coming from?
Well, the government's paying for them, so
The government. And
if
who do you think is controlling the Canadian government?
well, I think you don't have to look very far, but the vice prime minister isn't she a board of the World Economic Forum,
Mhm.
Freeland?
So they've got their marching orders from up high. What about the UN? Because I've heard people say they've noticed UN people on the ground, or especially in Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy. I heard.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know of any of that. I know that I've been at protests of G7 and G20 that happened, and they have services from all over Canada attend. They ask and request assistance for big events,
Mhm.
and you're going to have different police officers in different uniforms. You're going to have, especially in Ontario, there's so many um, other investigative units that investigate police, civilian, like the SIU, there's OIPRD, there's many civil investigative or provincially funded investigative people that investigate police. And when
Yeah.
you bring like police officers from other provinces, they're not mandated by those investigative agencies. So they don't have to wear name tags, or they don't have to wear their badge numbers. It's not necessarily the same thing across Canada.
So
So
do you think have you ever seen units that you're suspicious of, that you think, the profile of this unit is unusual?
no, not really.
No.
I think
Okay.
I think every police service in Canada have different uniforms, and they tell, and when public service or public order units that they have are different across Canada. So I don't buy into the conspiracy where there were, in Ottawa, there were officers from the UN or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Maybe there was. I wasn't there,
Mhm.
but seeing different uniforms and seeing different ways of identifying officers doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, that's weird. Do you think that there is do you think the UN has any involvement in this whole agenda on a grander scale of what is happening in Canada alongside the World Economic Forum and the WHO? Do you think there is?
Well, I think
Are they
the
part of?
WEF. I
Sorry.
think the WEF control from are obviously the World Health Organization, and you don't have to go very far. You can look on the internet. Klaus Schwab himself says how he controls the Canadian government. He's quite happy with all the new people that have been elected.
He brags. I think that we are one of the best countries in terms of his control. He's
Yes, and I think City of Toronto is also on one of the cities for World Economic Forum, and that's going in a direction led by our mayor, good John Tory. So
absolutely.
who's
So
also on the website.
it's
Not
remarkable.
conspiratory theories if it's actually true, is it? Like,
Yeah, well, that's right.
I mean,
And you're a detective, so I
yeah.
trust you. I trust, I'm going to listen to you over the media. You're in a very unique position because not only are you a seasoned police officer, but you are a detective. So do you know Vincent Gersey at all? Gersis, or he's
No.
another police officer in Ontario I think
Okay.
he's retired as well, but he's been quite outspoken on the issue. But I really admire someone like you willing to come forward, and we don't get to see this in the media. We certainly don't
Right.
see any of this coming out of mainstream media. And so it's very interesting to hear. I think my last question would be, what do you suggest that Canadians do? We're in a
I think,
pickle here.
right. I think Canadians have to respect each other, first of all, respect each other's choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our government needs to get their hands off of our media and our doctors and allow them the freedom to speak and give their opinions. I mean, they practice medicine. I think I heard a doctor say, we say we practice medicine or practice science. It's not exact. And for the first time not for the first time in history, but this time in history, they've made it so that it is an exact science. Well, it's never been exact science, and we all know it's not true. So I just think everyone needs to be given back their freedoms. The government needs to back off. Our government needs to change. Premier Ford in Ontario needs to be a conservative again instead of being a liberal. And as far as from what I've known, and you mentioned his daughter Krista, who I know, and as far as I know, most of the people running his camp are, Doug Ford's camp are Freeland supporters as well. So, you have all this stuff. I didn't even mention the fact that our chief of Toronto Police recently went to Switzerland, and we all know what's in Switzerland on a vacation.
Did it just happen to be when the World Economic Forum meeting was on in Davos? Or they didn't meet in Davos. I think they met in a different part of Switzerland in May.
Right. How long ago? Oh, in May.
That was in May. Yeah. And also the Bilderberg group had their meeting. So I understand Mark Carney was there for both of those meetings.
Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had Chief Raymer there from the Toronto Police Service.
Did he happen to be in Switzerland in May?
He was in Switzerland in May, as far as I know.
Okay, well, there you go.
Either that or if not, it was in June. But to travel to Switzerland at this time, and it just adds to the conspiracy or a theory. Obviously, I don't have his itinerary, and it's all a speculation. But judging by his reactions and the fact that he's not going to be, they're going to be replacing him. I assume the Toronto Police Service Board and service will make him a fall guy for all the bad things that have happened, and try to move on in a different light under different leadership. I left the Toronto Police Service, and because of the emails and letters I sent, not one senior officer reached out to me to talk to me. They didn't give me an exit interview, which I requested. No one was able to sit in a room with me. I'm not going to physically hurt you. I'm not going to do anything.
No.
I may question you on your integrity. And I wrote in my resignation or my retirement letter, I wrote that I'm leaving the service because of irreconcilable differences and employer discrimination. Is that I can no longer work for an employer that doesn't uphold the oath that I took.
That's right.
And doesn't uphold or respect the opinions and freedoms of everybody. And the service needs to pay, and I hope it'll be a long drawn out affair, because I believe our justice system has been affected by this, and it's been slowed down.
Has it been bought? Do you feel that the judicial system has been bought as well when you're looking at the decisions that are being made in
Well,
the
the Supreme
court?
Court of Canada announced that all their judges were vaccinated. So, and I think they're still leaning towards the fact that they don't want unvaccinated lawyers or judges or in courtrooms. So, and they've opened up Zoom calls. So this Zoom thing is, technology may be the worst thing that's happening. It's allowed this word to spread, and it's allowed alternatives to people having to attend court. Now you can sit on a Zoom call like this and testify. So
it's not quite the same. So here they have screened out any judge who is not vaccinated cannot serve as a judge. That right off the bat is problematic, right?
In the Supreme Court.
In the Supreme Court. What do you say for people who have tickets, who've been given tickets for not complying with the Quarantine Act and things like that? People who've been coming in or out of Canada and have been issued these. What should they do?
Fight them. I would think get legal advice and fight them, because I don't think they're constitutional at all. They certainly don't. They wouldn't pass the Charter of Rights test.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The Emergency Act, when it was put in place, whatever province you were in, I don't think it passed the tests that it was required to.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Emergency Act that Canadian government put in place, provincially put in place, it was all put in to circumvent the actual charter and the procedure that has to take place.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that to push their agenda. But if all these emergency acts finally get to court, they're going to lose if our Charter of Rights is upheld.
Yes.
Because it won't pass. It won't pass that the checks and balances that are in place were not passed.
Exactly. So your future prediction of Canada is dire in a sense of what you feel is coming down the pipe this fall. You have retreated to some farmland. What do you suggest that Canadians do aside from repairing relationships and becoming more united? Because I think they have managed to divide us. They've divided families, dear friends. The society is very fragmented right now, which is perfect.
Right.
That has set a beautiful base for divide and conquer. So we need to reestablish those relationships. But on a practical level, what else do you suggest that people do if we have a draconian government that is violating laws? What can we do?
Well, you try to submerge yourself in a community with like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
Find ways that you'll be able to survive any food shortages, fuel shortages, and have an exit strategy. I think all Canadians need an exit strategy to get out of the country. I think I would hate to abandon the country. My family lineage goes back to pioneers in Canada. So we've been here since the 1600s, and I would find it very hard to leave the country, to allow it to become where it seems to be going. But if it came down to protecting my children, and that would be the safest thing to do, that's what I'd do.
Mm-hmm.
I'd leave the country. There's other countries out there that are maybe not as advanced to this agenda as Canada. So
does it feel to you that Canada is one of the top tier countries that this agenda is pointed at? Like the World Economic Forum seems to be quite obsessed with Canada. Resource rich, perfect location, very strategic location. Do you feel that Canada is in one of the most dire positions?
I do. It's as long as the political, we keep same in the political environment that we're in, and the same people are in power. It's a scary situation. The vaccine passports, the vaccine IDs that are coming this fall. It will be a lot scarier to see what they can do with that. Stop you from going to stores. I don't know what their plans are.
Mhm.
You might not be able to drive. They'll suspend your license if you're not vaccinated. It depends how hard they push it. But once they have essentially chipped everybody, I think it'll be very hard to survive without a community
Yeah.
of like-minded people. And at that point, if it's that hard to survive, maybe you just have to escape. I mean, if you're not vaccinated now, you almost feel like a prisoner anyway. You
Yeah.
can't fly directly out of your country, and that's still continuing. So, which is obviously a violation of our rights again.
They dropped that, but I sense it's temporary.
Yes. But you do get harassed when you come back from the border.
Oh, yes.
If you haven't tested. Again, that's a medical procedure which the Charter of Rights protects us from.
I got hit with a ticket just shy of $6,000 coming into the country a month ago
right.
for refusing another PCR at arrival.
Yeah.
And they initially said they were going to arrest me. And
right.
then all of a sudden it switched into being issued a ticket, which
right.
of course I'm contesting. But
yes.
I felt like I was coming into North Korea. It felt
right.
very dark and oppressive here, having been out of the country.
Yeah.
Re-entering was quite dark.
Yes, I've been talking to some Amish people who obviously aren't in the media, don't have any source of media or whatever, and are dual citizens of the U.S. and Canada. And they went to the U.S. and they came back with no tests, and they charged them as well. And Amish have lived this way of life of non-vaccines, and that's the way they are.
Yeah.
That's a religion, and to force a medical procedure on a religious, obviously a religious practice that they have is absolutely it's mind blowing. And
would
when
you
they
ever
just looked at them, and I didn't know what to say. I go, well, they breached your rights.
So do you think that there was that leaked document that came out a year and a half ago? I think it was October 2020 it came out. It was a document that predicted what was coming down the pipe. And it was eerie because it was extremely accurate to every quarter what was going to happen. But there is some mention in that document that what is going to happen to the unvaccinated, and could this end up, that the unvaccinated are put in internment camps. What's your thought on that?
My thought is history has a tendency of repeating itself. And we've seen what happened in World War II with the Japanese. We've seen what happened with the Jewish people. It's scary what countries will do if they're put in a situation where they feel like the government feels like they have to protect people. And the Japanese, obviously, that was a huge error. They were all locked up in internment camps just because of the circumstances of World War II. And I think it's much the same. I think the propaganda and the brainwashing was used on the same scale for Nazi Germany to, get everyone to hate the Jewish people. And, and that's, you can go back into biblical situations and talk about biblical events against the Jewish people, God's people, in history. And there's the one bright light in all that is there's always consequence to the people who, go after God's people. And, hopefully, this is one of these situations where it becomes good versus evil, and which I believe it's become, and good will good will conquer, like we
Yeah, it
always
does.
say.
I agree with you, Rob. With more than anything, we're in a spiritual war when it comes right down to it. And we have some very evil characters who are trying to play God.
Right.
And usurp God in a sense, dethrone him. And it's a very, very dark world that we're living in. I just quickly want to ask you about guns. There's a lot of hunters in Canada, and there's a lot of fear that the government is going to change the gun laws. What would be your advice to Canadians who have guns or want hunting guns and licenses? What would you recommend that Canadians do?
Well, hopefully you have your license already, and hopefully you have your guns. I think long gun registry, they scrapped that, so we're going full circle where they want you to register all your guns. I think, and laws have changed in many ways already with regards to guns. And I can tell you, for 100% certainty, 98% of the guns used in crime in Canada are guns that are here illegally, whether they're stolen from people, Canadians, or whether they're brought from the US or other countries. They're not Canadian guns being used in criminal offenses.
Yes.
I think I had one instance, maybe two, where the gun that we seized came from a Canadian home, and those guns were got either from a break and enter or from a gun owner that wasn't cautious enough, and didn't store them properly, and they got in the hands of the wrong people. The whole gun thing is a sham with the government. And if you have this situation where they're trying to enforce vaccines on people, and then we think guns are an important problem now too. I think disarming the people too, you should be very suspicious of that happening at the same time.
So what are Canadians to do? Because there is that sense right now that they might come after our guns, which leaves Canadians in a very vulnerable position. When you don't trust your government, having a gun is quite comforting. Because it feels as though we might be heading into a period of time where our government's coming after us.
Well, I guess this goes back to the whole stay and fight or take flight. And if it comes to the point where you think you need to use your gun against the government, I think it's time to leave. No matter what situation is, I would never. I don't think violence is the answer to anything.
No.
And I've seen too much of that in my career. That if you believe in your whole heart that the government's coming for you and you want to defend yourself, then defend yourself by going to a different place and don't stay in Canada. And don't act out in violence.
Well, I think as well, there is a sense of, if you're a fabulous prepper and you've got yourself set up on a farm and you've got your chickens and your goats and your pantry is full, and you have people arriving at your door wanting to help themselves because they're hungry. And I think it is going to come down to this, where people, it seems to me that the supply chain and food, there's going to be shortages. And so not only are you maybe needing to use your gun against your government, but you may need just to protect your own family.
And and you're describing is a horrible situation.
It's a horrible situation
where you have to fight off your neighbor because they were asleep during this whole time. And you were awake.
Do you think it could come to this? Like, do you think chaos, that this is a scenario that is possible, where people are, when people are hungry and there's no fuel, chaos.
I think the government has alluded to the fact that they've already kind of hinted at the fact of what they would do. And, we had a federal Liberal recently say that you don't have the right to own your own property.
I found that very eerie.
Well, it's eerie, but they're sending a message, right? This whole evil good thing is that they have to tell you what they're going to do to you before they do it.
Yes.
It's sort of the, I guess, you know, satanic rite of passage, so to speak. If they tell you that they're going to do it, I told you so, and you know they're allowed to do it now.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
and so I think what'll happen, maybe if you're a good prepper, before that gets to the point where your neighbors are trying to steal your food, I think your neighbors would have pointed you out and directed the government to take you away before it gets to that point. And so that the government will take your food and they will, supply the good neighbor, and he'll get, his credit score rations put up for that month. And I think, it'll just be a credit score system where
That's right.
if you're a good citizen, you're going to, you're going to be well paid.
And this system is already active in China. Do you think we're heading in the same direction where you have a social credit score?
Well, if your prime minister says that he thinks that, he kind of envious of the Chinese government and how they operate. I believe, I think he said it all, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Really?
And when they talked about this new digital identity coming out, they have said there's footage of a Zoom call where they've said your vaccine status will be part of that, one of the parameters on that. So it would be your IP address. So they've got your internet, they've got your driver's license, they have your health status, your vaccine status, your banking status. That's the social credit system, and you get points. It's like a Black Mirror episode, but it's very eerie. I think you're right. I think that comment about, I think it was the justice minister saying we do have the right to confiscate your private property. It's not really yours. That
I think
when
his
I
words
heard
were,
that sent chills down my spine, because I thought they're setting the groundwork. You were warned. Your private property in Canada actually is not yours.
Right.
We have the right to take it from you. And we've seen that in history, right?
Yes. Yep.
That.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, I've really enjoyed chatting with you. This has been a very enlightening conversation, very sobering, but I really appreciate your perspective. I appreciate your transparency, and you're brave. And you, to me, are a true Canadian hero for speaking out against this obvious corruption. And we need more people like you to stand up and call it what it is right now. So thank you so much, Rob LeMaittre, for your time. And I wish you and your family all the best. And we will stay in touch.
Yes, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for being brave to do this as well. I mean, for people in media or to put media sources out, you have to be brave to do that. And I think if we had more brave media person or people putting stuff out, I think we might be better off too. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and enjoy your day.
Okay, you too.
Okay, take care.
Take care.